I am beyond excited to welcome our guest speaker today, Alessio Bax. He is the pianist, piano professor at New England Conservatory. Welcome, Alessio.
Great to be here, Tanni.
So let's talk about your recent album, the name is called Forgotten Dance. I'm actually very interested in the title as soon as I see it because I just want to dive in to see what's the story of music in Untold. And the word dance itself already has so much energy. You already connect with your audiences.
Well, thank you. This is a project that's been in my, say, my closet, in my drawers, secret drawers of project for many, many years. When I first had my debut recording in 2004, Baroque Reflections, that was on Warner Classics. I already wanted to record some of the works in this album as something based on dance. You know, dance and music have been always linked since the beginning of time. And then composers approached dance in different ways. And so you have, for example, the Bach English suite, where we these whole dances, and then the Bartok dance suite.
Yes.
I mean, two styles are completely different, but at the end, quite similar as well.
Yeah.
So, and then another key piece was Ravel La Valse, which is a piece that I lived with for many years, and it developed with me, and then the rest kind of filled in the blanks.
Among the 19 chapters, which is a lot of work, do you have a favorite piece?
I can't choose. I mean, when you decide to record an album or make a recital program, I think you really have to love every moment, every piece, every phrase, just the same. Now, of course, there are some pieces I feel better playing than others, but I think every piece in this album has its special qualities.
When you come up with this album and the titles, do you have an initial thought of who are the audiences we'll be listening to?
Not too much.
Not too much.
You know, it's the biggest luck that we have as classical musicians is that the music we serve is so much bigger than us, so much bigger than the audience. We're just trying to recreate these great works of art. So we practice every day, we improve our skills, we hone our craft, just to try to understand this incredible music. So that's always the first criteria, I think. And then hopefully I do a good job at it, and you know, and next week I'll do a better job, and in 2 weeks will be even better. And I hope, especially with the recordings. For example, this, of course, as I said, it was a long dream of mine to record an album based on these works, but the actual process of the CD was supposed to start before COVID. Then it got postponed, and the actual recording was 2 years ago. So it just came out recently. Just the way scheduling works, it's quite complicated. So, of course, the pieces have evolved with me in these 2 years. So I always find the recording is a picture of what you want to say at that time. But by nature, you cannot be satisfied with the recording that was done 2 years ago. You know, there are surprises. For example, when I discover sometimes older recordings of mine, there are pieces that perhaps I haven't played since. And my thought is, oh, I could play that. That's interesting, you know. But for the major repertoire, of course, this is music that keeps growing. You need to discover new layers, and you'll never be happy with it.
Yeah, but I'm curious, since you brought it up, for the timing. Besides preparation for all the musics, what are some of the other challenges you faced in the process of making this album?
Not too many challenges, other than I was kind of ready for it in different stages of my life, and then it kept getting postponed, and then one time it was scheduled, and I was called by the New York Philharmonic to replace Les Fauves Ancenas with Schumann concerto. So I said, I'm sorry, I think it's an opportunity I cannot pass, so I canceled it. And then the next year there were COVID restrictions, so we were ready to go recording it in Italy, and but the team couldn't come from the UK without quarantine. And then finally we recorded it together with another album with my wife Lucille Chung, a four-hand and two-piano album of Ravel and Debussy. So we did both recordings in not even 5 days. It was quite intense. But by that time I lived with the music quite a bit. I mean, ideally you have a nice tour and you get to play it and then record it after, but it never works out that way.
I think this album really witnessed a lot of your life experiences.
In a way, yes. And then some of the pieces, the Bach, for example, I first learned when I was 9 years old. And then I didn't play it for over 20 years. and then I played it and let it rest again. And then when it was time to record it, I said, I should revisit this and look at it under different lights to make it, because there's so many Bach recordings, and I thought, I need to feel the need to say something special with this.
Talking about Bach, Douglas Hofstadter once said that he imagined sending Bach's music into the universe because it's a creation for life, for humans, and it's timeless. And this is exactly the description that I felt when I listened to your album.
Thank you.
And I burst into tears. So thank you really to bring Bach into the album and make it to actually the top of the list. So I have a question for a lot of the musicians. How are you able to achieve such a limpid phrasing while keeping texture in a very complex and detailed form?
That's very good. I mean, there are two things. I mean, Bach's music, in a way, it's probably the most difficult, because there's so much happening at once, yet it's all happening in a very limited range. So very often, I remember when I did the Bach Transcribed album, which had some of the really complicated transcription by Godowski of Bach, of violin solo partitas and sonatas, where there are so many lines, it's so difficult to play, there's so many things going on, it brings themes from different movements, it's pretty incredible, but very complex, very thick. Yet, he's using the whole keyboard. But Bach does a similar thing within even a fifth or an octave. So it's much more challenging because everything is close by. So you really need to develop total independence of fingers, not only that, but find a way to have different sounds, different colors, different articulation within the same hand, and sometimes shared between the two hands. That's something that maybe not in the suites. In the suites are not terribly polyphonic, you know? But in fugues, for example, it's something that it's almost impossible to listen for. There's just too much for my ear to control. So you have to really feel it and know how to execute different lines. It takes a lot of practice, I think.
I think the Bach's Brandenburg concerto, which the concerto glossal form, really help us to understand how each individual soloist can weave different lines together, and probably that can bring up to the piano.
That's really like perfect example of democracy, you know. Everyone has something different to say, yet the end result of everything together works so perfectly. And so, you know, as a real democracy, it's very difficult to make it work and for everyone to be happy in a way. But it's really exciting too. But what I think as a pianist, especially, the way you need to prepare is just as hard as preparing Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto. I mean, you need that kind of strength, that kind of independence, and except, as I said, in a much smaller range.
And also Bach would like to play with different instruments like clavichords to harpsichords. But although we only have one piano, but you really bring out the full capacity of the piano. In terms of like articulations, phrasings, dynamics, do you have some of the advices?
Bach's music is a blank canvas where you can do anything you want. And actually, it would sound still great if you do anything you want. I think there's some kind of unspoken rules about how music, not only Bach, but how music develops. You know, I always start with the harmonic landscape. Say if you have a tonic going to the dominant, there has to be more intensity or a journey that brings you to the dominant, and then physically you need to feel a resolution. So once you think in these very basic terms, 50% of your choices are eliminated. They're just not possible.
That's very smart.
And I don't think it's just in Bach. I think every piece of classical music, Western classical music, needs to abide by these rules. And then there's another layer of indications that the composer writes. I think that if there is anything written by any major composer that's not notes or rhythm, it's because they had something in mind to tell us, something that we wouldn't do naturally. You know, they didn't waste ink. And when you go to Beethoven or Bartók, or it doesn't matter who, they decided to put a dot here and a slur there. And Bach also did that, rarely. But when he did, obviously it's because he couldn't trust that people would understand his message. He wanted to say something different. And I think it's our responsibility to do that in a convincing way, so that you're not saying the right sounds, but with the wrong accent, you know, with the wrong meaning. And that's very important. But in Bach, it's quite essential to, because he writes so little, you know. So
true.
you really have to think of harmony, and that goes hand in hand with articulation, at least on the piano, because articulation is a long subject, I think. As pianists, we're trained to think of articulation as mostly the length of the note, and whether it's short or it's long, and mostly the spacing between the notes. Very rarely we think of articulation like a wind player or a singer would think in terms of the beginning of the note. How do you play? What kind of sound does a note that is stuck as a dot in it has? It's not how long it is only, but it's what kind of sound it has. And then, you know, harpsichordists have to do a lot with time, for example, in order to have it's a miracle how an harpsichordist, where you have this instrument, and as much as I like it, I mean, the sound is one sound, and you can still hear all the polyphony. How do they do that? It's with time and even rubato and displacement, showing cadences and showing where. So that's all information that we need to use as pianists. On top of that, we can use sound as well. So that's why I love to play Bach on the piano, because there's so many possibilities, and I think sound is maybe not the first one, you know. Then we think about sound and then decide to create our own world with it. So it is incredibly exciting and incredibly difficult, because you can decide in your practice room what you're going to do, but to keep track of all these details in a nice and fresh way and spontaneous way.
I think those what you mentioned are very important and not always being brought up actually in the public. And I want to go back to the thing that you mentioned, technique. This may sound very fundamental, but do you have any unconventional methods or ways to help improve fitness in Bach's work?
I mean, I think you have to develop your technique with all the major repertoire, and from Bach on. If I didn't play pieces like Rachmaninoff Concerti I wouldn't be able to play Bach the way I play. You know, it's not. I don't believe in the idea that, okay, my technique is good enough for Bach, but not for something else. If you want to have total freedom of articulation, of expressions, or sound, you need to have, just even starting with simple muscles, they need to be available to you. Then whether you decide to use them and how is different. One of my teachers, I remember telling me that building muscles in your body, muscles, you know, not bodybuilding, but muscles that you use to play, and hands, and the strength of the hands, it's like putting money in the bank. One day you need some, and you can use. Also, as I get older, I see how important that was when I was young, to really work on repertoire and not compromise. Not if something is uncomfortable, find a solution or build enough strength to be able to make it comfortable. Once you have all this at your disposal, then it becomes more fun to play.
I think muscle building, not like athletic ways, but in piano is very crucial.
And I find another thing, you know, that I always think about is we don't think so much of gestures. A singer needs to breathe, and as pianists, we don't think much of gestures. We are trained mostly for efficiency. So we think, you know, we have to hit a key in the center, and so on. That's how we learn as kids. But then that forces us to make gestures that go against the music. And then we try to fix that with musical ideas, and it becomes very difficult. So a singer needs to breathe, a flute player needs to breathe, violinist has a bow. And we never think of the kind of gesture that we make on the piano, and how our musical choices and those gestures should match to make our life easier.
I think after all, everything goes back to physics.
Exactly.
And we as bodies have to adapt to the physical world. Yes.
There's a discrepancy in what we do, that we have to create tension in music without having physical tension. So that's already a difficult thing to do. We have to use gravity as we're pushing down keys, while musically trying to defy gravity. You know, a phrase wants to rise and fall, and all these great composers, most of the time, what they're trying to do is to keep it afloat. And as pianists, we're using gravity. We're pushing keys down, but we have to find ways not to feel that way, and that's very difficult.
Let's go back to the Bach, and I want to reach to maybe the third or fourth layer. In terms of the philosophy to Bach, do you have your own of your storytellings or thoughts?
Storytelling. I mean, I think there's so much in his music, and it kind of. I don't like the idea of imposing a philosophy or imposing a concept to music making. Someone that's absolutely recognized as a great Bach master like Glenn Gould, he was very good at imposing his own concept on the music. You heard Gould first. He decided what to do with a particular piece, and it was incredible how well he could do it and how convincingly he could do it. I think, again, music comes first, and so I like to discover it, starting with harmony, with little clues that the composer writes. Especially Bach. He's writing lots of 16 notes, but they could go in many different directions and staying within the harmony. But he decides to bend and twist in certain ways. Why? Why did he do that? And so that's all information that it's important to decide what kind of musical choices you're going to make. And the more you put all these details together, the more the message unfolds itself. And then you discover what great music is about, or what you think great music is about at that point. I always go back to the source, to the music itself, to try to find why I'm playing this piece, rather than saying, I want to play this piece to show this. I think that's very limiting.
Have you ever connected your maybe personal experiences to Bach's music?
Well, it's in a similar way. I mean, personal experiences are what makes you as a person, and you cannot avoid that. You cannot avoid sounding like the sum of all your experiences, but it's not something that I'm trying to show, because that would not be natural. And plus, that's not what music is there for, in my opinion. I don't want to use music to show people what my experiences are. That would be very, very indulgent and not fair. I really think it's so much greater than us. I want to use my experiences in order to help me find the music, but my experiences are my own. Sorry, I don't want people to, that's not what music for me is about. But still, that will always come through.
I think we're the messengers. Well, in response to your album that also includes Debussy's, and I want to quote a Debussy insight on Bach, so I have to read this. And if we look at the works of J.S. Bach, a benevolent God to which all musicians should offer a prayer to defend themselves against mediocrity, on each page we discover things which we thought we were only born yesterday, but from delightful abstracts to an overflowing of religious feeling greater than anything we have since discovered. And in his work, we will search in vain for anything that is lacking in good taste. So I think the English suites are no exception, and it's monumental, it's incomparable. So thank you so much to let us, and especially the younger generations, to keep remembering of how Bach's contributing to the music world, even to the nowadays modern music scene.